My guest today is Aneesh, who is a dear friend and has honestly been a big source of inspiration and perspective for me for a number of years now. We first met at an investor event in Mumbai, and we pretty much spent the whole evening talking to each other about life, philosophy, sports, haiku poetry, and pretty much everything in between. So, by profession, Anish works at the intersection of sports, media, and technology. He's a fellow on the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Media, Entertainment, and Sport. He was a member of the Twitter India founding team and spent 5 years there heading sports partnerships for the Asia Pacific region. He's a big tennis and Roger Federer fan and also claims to hit one-handed backhands but into the nets. Anish, welcome.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you. It's great to be with you. This is how we spend Sunday afternoons, huh?
Yeah, it's perfect. We've been meaning to catch up for a while, so what better way to do it? I've hopefully given you a glowing introduction. I know there's so many more things, and we'll include those in the show notes, perhaps. But I want to dive straight in. So, what does inspiration mean to you?
You know, when I think of inspiration, the expression "Ummeed pe duniya kayam hai," which I think translates to "Hope lights the world," immediately comes to mind, right? Because to me, it feels like inspiration gives you hope to take that next step, especially in times like these, when you see people helping each other out, sharing information, sharing resources, amplifying requests in the midst of a pandemic, and that's super inspiring. You definitely feel like you need that hope to hang on to, so that we can see a better day. But we all know it's a long road, so inspiration is super important to get us there.
That's beautiful. And just pulling on the thread of hope for a second. So unfortunately, we live in a world where there's not always hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when there isn't hope, those are times when we perhaps feel negative, lethargic, stuck, and frankly uninspired. So I'm really curious, when you've been uninspired in the past or recently, what do you do? How do you actually navigate that situation?
I think the easiest answer is to do something else. And I mean that by, it may feel counterintuitive, but I picked this up from a book that I read many years ago called The Perfect Pitch by John Steele.
That's a beautiful book, and I remember you were the one that recommended that book to me, and I got it and I read it, and it's absolutely incredible.
It's great, right? It's like one of those books which you remember reading and then you keep going back to, which I think speaks to its power. And in one of the chapters there, John reflects on the process of planning things. And you know, if you want to connect the dots and build meaningful connections, you have to go through this, I guess, 5-step process of grazing and putting things together. And step 3 is drop it. And so you really do have to walk away from this problem, I think, that you're trying to obsess over, or where you're trying to find inspiration, and listen to music, go watch a movie, whatever works for you. And he describes how this has been something that has worked for Nobel Prize winners. So it should work for us too in some ways.
That really resonates and actually reminds me of something from the show Mad Men. Have you seen it? The show about advertising in the 60s.
I've watched a little bit of it, not as much as I would have liked, or as much as my friends have gotten into it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. We were going through a phase of selling the Inspo product to agencies, advertising agencies, and I was really new to that world, and it was super complex. And just through my research, and I came across Mad Men, and I thought I'll watch it just for fun and to maybe just get into the psyche and head a little bit. So anyways, what you said reminded me of this quote from the show that the protagonist, Don Draper, the creative director, says to one of his copywriters. She is in the process of writing some copy and thinking. And he said, obsess about the problem, think deeply about it, and then completely drop it. Don't think about it again, and an idea will just appear. It will just pop into your head. I'm paraphrasing it horribly, but I think it's the same spirit of in the same spirit of what John Steele and what you're also saying. I really also love this concept of grazing. Right, you go out to graze. So how do you graze actually? Right, because I'm sure we all have like a different inspirational diet, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are like certain rituals or activities or patterns that you follow, or perhaps you don't, and that's also equally interesting. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I think over the past few years, as far as grazing is concerned, I've tried to curate a lot of the platforms that I spend time on. And so people that you follow, accounts that you can learn from. I think that's part of it, right? I feel like we live in this incredible time in like human life now where you can learn from the smartest people on the planet for free. And it takes time to get there because you're not always sure what you're looking out for. Sometimes you may just learn about something new and then you end up trying to, follow a few people or a few accounts from which you'd like to hear a little more from. And so that's one form of praising. The other sometimes can be a little more connected to people that you're friends with or respect or know, right? And then you're maybe going back to them from time to time, looking into what they may be listening to, for example, or having their playlist shared, or a few things that or that where you enjoy their taste, and you feel like that might be something that inspires you in another moment.
Very cool. So let's just continue on this metaphor and rabbit hole of grazing because I think that's actually lovely, right? So how conscious are you when you are grazing, right? How conscious are you when inspiration strikes, right? Are you actively looking for it? I know you said that just drop it, but are you dropping it in order so that an idea, let's say, presents itself and you're almost like summoning it or attracting it or expecting it? Or is it a case where it just reveals itself at the most unexpected times and you're grazing, like, let's say, completely without an agenda?
It's definitely a bit of both. I feel like I'm a big believer in the notion that the people that you draw into your life are a result of the energy that you put out into the world. And, one of the joys of life is to sort of retain a sense of wonder, and most of that I think comes from the people closest to you. So I'm actively looking for inspiration from the people that I meet, from the things that I read, and nature that I seek. I think that's another really incredible source, especially now living here in Lausanne, in Switzerland. You're so close to the lakes, the mountains, a lot of greenery, and it's incredible what being amongst that can do for your state of mind.
Yeah, I've been really loving all of your Instagram stories and photographs and video clips of your life in Lausanne. Paradise is the word. So I think in the show notes, if you're okay with it, we'll definitely put down your Instagram handle because I feel like it's just a daily moment of calm. Like there's so many horrible things on social media at the moment, and then I'll see just this lake that you're next to, and it's really beautiful.
Crazy. But having said that, like inspiration from serendipity can be even more satisfying, right? Because it usually comes from sort of connecting dots that sometimes only you can. I almost like to think of it. I love playing, I love quizzing / trivia, however the world understands it. And I think like to think of it as a, within a game of trivia, you're proactively either looking for an answer to a question that has been asked, or you're trying to work out the connections which might unexpectedly lead you to the answer when you have no clue whatsoever. So yeah.
Oh, that's actually a lovely analogy. That's beautiful. Never thought of it in that context before. I think we'll start using that because it's a beautiful combination of like actively looking for the solution that you seek, but also creating permission for something else to appear, right?
Mm.
And in that dual state of mind, because it's not so zero or one that I'm either here to get inspiration or I'm here not to get inspiration. I'm just here. So that's really cool. Definitely going to use that in the future. So let's move along this sort of, let's say, the inspiration process. That sounds so drab and horrible, but I really do want to learn about how not only what inspiration means to you, how you get it, how you graze it, but then what happens next, right? So
Mm.
let's say you've been metaphorically grazing, you've been for a beautiful walk in Lausanne, you've read some wonderful tweets on Twitter, you've seen some great photos on Instagram, and you've gathered everything that it is that you need, and you're
Mm.
synthesizing it. What's your next move?
I guess there could be many next moves. I try as much as possible to either write it down for myself or share when I think it's appropriate. I'll give you an example. I'm fascinated by this whole idea of the A list of your dreams.
Wow.
Okay, it comes from a challenge that I was reading about many years ago, where essentially you had to write down 100 dreams that you have, and then
Wow.
try to prioritize those 100 to your A list of your dreams, so that you can try and take a shot at it in your life.
So
Right?
you've done the activity. You wrote down your
Yeah.
100. Wow.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I realized as I started attempting that challenge that it's really, really hard to come up with 100 dreams right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just started like writing whatever I could, or at least that I had in my mind at the time, but then I dropped it. And then I kept coming back whenever I gathered inspiration in a moment over the years. And that's how the list continues to grow. Okay. So I'll give you an example, right? In 2017, I was doing a holiday in Europe, and we happened to luck out with renting a nice car in the south of France, and so we did this road trip, a 1 day road trip from Saint Tropez to Monaco, just like driving along the coast, right? So beautiful summer day, like Mediterranean to the right, like barely anyone out there, like music, or just really soaking in the experience. And I'm a big Formula One fan. So as we reached Monaco, we realized we could actually drive the circuit, right? The
Oh,
Formula One
wow.
circuit, which is the streets of Monaco.
That's
And
fun.
so, yeah, really, really fun. And I think, from that day, like just from the experiences of that day, just driving by the water, I wrote down one of the things on my list as you know uh, as a dream to drive down as many roads by the water around the world as possible because of that one magical experience.
That's unbelievable. Wait. Let me. I may
Yeah,
have missed what you said earlier, but you're
yeah,
saying that did you write this down
yes.
before you'd even
No, I wrote this
undertaken that
down
experience?
after.
After.
I
Right.
wrote this down after. And so that was the point of like, stringing together these things, because
I got it.
you may not have all your dreams like set in place at any given moment. And the reality is that life is evolving. Your dreams may evolve as well, but it's interesting to write them down for yourself, and then to see what sticks out. And you still think about that one day, and you still look at life and say, okay, if I have an opportunity somewhere else, or if I am, traveling somewhere, would I replicate that experience? And just a nice way to give yourself something to look forward to.
That is that's so thoughtful, and I really love that approach as well. In fact, you know, I really enjoy your general approach to social media. I've told you this before offline in a number of conversations, but I love when everyone else is sort of flexing, right, or projecting strength on social media, or talking about, massive, let's say, personal wins and successes, and everyone again is going with an agenda to build influence. Oftentimes, myself included, I fall into that trap, and I try and actively get out of it. I find that your approach to Twitter, to Instagram, it's just like, it really is a breath of fresh air. It's almost effortless, and I'm just sort of synthesizing that with what you've just said as well. It's almost like you're documenting your life, right, privately or publicly. So I remember when you were here in India recently, you had a thread on food,
Yeah.
right, on Twitter, and every day, even though we didn't talk every day, I sort of got this micro glimpse into your life just through, like, what is he eating today, and wow, that looks delicious, and where is he, and did he like it? And I just remember, and I feel that it's almost a beautiful way of, like, again, just gathering those pieces of inspiration, right? Either for, let's say, a future moment in time when it will be tangibly useful, quote unquote, but even the process of gathering it is a joy, right?
Yeah.
And witnessing you gathering or grazing is also a joy. So it's not everything needs an endpoint, I guess. Not everything has to be used as raw material in the service of something else.
That is so true, and thanks. It's really kind, but maybe I'll share where that came from. Actually, many years ago, and I have to go and find that blog post link or the author, so I can hopefully share it with you for the show notes. I read this blog post again from another advertising planner talking about how to be interesting. Right. And early on in the internet, you look at these titles and you think, oh my, clickbait again, right? You're just going to stumble into something that is not going to be useful. But I read it for the fun of it, and the way he broke it down was fascinating, right? So he says, first, in order to be interesting, you have to be interested very deeply in something, and then second, in order to be interesting, you have to share. And the timing of the blog post is fascinating because the kinds of things he talks about when talking about sharing is things like, oh, you should share one photo a day on Flickr, right? This is like way before Instagram.
Flickr, back in the day,
right?
yeah.
Back in the day. Or he'd say, okay, you should spend time in a coffee shop every week, so you can just listen into the conversation, just serendipity, don't expect anything. Or write 50 words about a piece of art that you have seen, or a movie that you've watched, or a song that you've listened to. And I think it's like the ongoing creative process for yourself that you never know in hindsight how it may work out, or what dots it helps you connect. And that's how a lot of these things started, right? So when I'm sharing, like, that's why I enjoy building threads on Twitter, for instance, because it's over a period of time in an area of interest, right? Or just something I may be inspired by or think of at the moment. And putting it out there helps me refine that craft as well of sharing, right? How you're writing, what you're sharing, what it means mostly to you, and then how people react to it. But an example of this is a thread on the notion of a postcard, right? It's like, love writing letters and postcards to friends. And my brother, earlier in my childhood, when you'd actually write physical letters, right? And so while we don't send as many right now, I just wanted to capture some moments for posterity. And so I distinctly remember this time. It's like 5 years ago, actually, in June 2016. I was in Dharamshala, and we were walking out onto the tarmac to take a flight. And you usually don't get to do that, right? In big cities, you usually take the bridge and get into the aircraft. But you walk onto the tarmac, but it's also such a stunning airport because you're walking onto the tarmac, the plane's there, and like in the background are the Himalayas, right? Like grand, and just sort of like awestruck by that moment. And so I was like, oh, cool, like this is a postcard moment. Right?
Yeah.
So I just like put that, and I started a thread on postcards. And It could be a photo, it could be a video of some place that I'm in. And, whenever I travel to some places, I just end up, even if it's in the neighborhood sometimes, to be honest, if it looks really nice, just put that. And then you look back on it fondly from time to time for inspiration. So in a strange way, you're creating this like, potential loop of inspiration for yourself
Yeah.
with the memories that you have. Yeah. And the same thing that I've been doing here in Switzerland, right? Like play this game called Railway Roulette, go to the station, pick a place to explore, take a train. And I personally love train travels, and it's like Switzerland is like la la land for that. So it's another way you try and gather inspirations. Like you do something you enjoy as often as possible.
I found this fascinating that like those moments where inspiration strikes, they're like forever etched in our memory, right? Like completely just crystallized. If I was to ask you something that you did last week or even yesterday, you may not have, something, a conversation that you had or a food that you ate or a song that you listened to, you may not remember. And yet you remember, as you put it so beautifully, that postcard moment in such sort of like multicolor clarity, right? And high definition. And I find that one, that's just interesting how the brain works and how memory works. But also, I also find, especially when I'm, well, let's say, if I were to come across one of your threads on Twitter, I would enjoy that thread and your thoughts even more if I could glimpse into the process that helped get you there. Right. And I think that's, this is one of those, it's been like a semi-conscious habit that I've been cultivating. I love to read lots of fiction. And when I start an interesting book, like within a couple of chapters, I'll just go and do a bunch of research on the author, and I'll go on like some long YouTube podcasting rabbit hole where I just like to like listen to their voice, listen to the sound of their voice, and just like glimpse into their mind, because for some reason that just enriches the consumption experience for me. And I guess I wouldn't say this is a particularly profound insight. This is pretty much what influencers on social media are doing all the time, right? They're just like giving a glimpse into their process to help build a sense of connection or community or whatever. I think that's just really fascinating.
But I think what you said there is so important for just building meaningful connections, right? Whether it's with people or with certain brands for that matter, where you literally were storytelling creatures. And what you described there was, kind of the story within the story.
Yeah.
so we like to think of them as rabbit holes, but it just is drawing you in further and helping you appreciate what went into the final output, but also, serves almost as a really fun way to have a conversation about it without necessarily talking only about what transpired.
Yeah, 100%. It's like I just wrote down this random scribble that I'd probably tweet about later. But inspiration, it's almost like a prologue, right? Like, and a prologue is always valuable in a story, right? Just to like set tone, mood, context, convey information, convey a sense of momentum, whatever it may be. It definitely serves a purpose. There was also something earlier in the conversation that you said that I really loved, is that you've almost designed this system of inspiration for yourself. I think you described it as a loop. And that also just fascinates me, right? Like the fact that I was having this chat with a friend in fashion design the other day, that how inspiration for so many designers, it's a lifestyle choice, right? It's not actually something that just sporadically strikes and then you use. It's like, no. You wake up every single day and you live an inspired life, right? And you aspire to live that inspired life. And yes, there will be moments when, let's say, the creative tank is empty and you need to graze and literally fill it with bits and bobs. But it's a conscious choice. It's not something that just happens. So again, it kind of taps into that theme that we were discussing earlier of like, it's both active and passive. Right? You've got to you don't always know how the lightning bolt will strike and where the next thing or idea will come from, but you've got to sort of create the conditions for it, right? Like, yeah. So I don't know what point I'm making here. I'm just rambling, but
It's all good.
it's
We don't
interesting.
have to make points like this. We just
Exactly.
it doesn't have to be a means to an end.
Yeah, for sure. So, one question I've been actually really excited to ask you, especially
Mm.
hearing your answers and the way that you graze in your life in Switzerland, is how has your process of getting inspiration grazing changed in this post-pandemic world, if at all?
Mm.
Because on the one hand, you're like, you know, you live an extremely digital life, right? By sort of by passion, by profession as well.
Yeah.
And yet you're also going for these long sort of isolated walks and
Mm.
train rides, right? So, which I guess I don't know what the situation in Switzerland is right now, the
Mm.
specifics of it, but I guess you have been locked down at some point. So yeah, how's the process changed for you?
If I can, I try to combine getting inspiration with movement now, because
Mm,
we've all, I think, for the better part of a year, working from home. It can mean spending most of your day on a chair. So I enjoy stepping out, and it's actually been one of the privileges we've had out here. The
right.
fact that um, we have access to nature or quiet places around that we can go, on long walks for without it being a challenge. And so typically that might be for me, 30 to 45-minute walks in the morning if I feel like I just want to go to a coffee shop close by, pick up a coffee, and just start the day like that in some instances, or sometimes it's like longer 45 to 60-minute walks post dinner. And because Lausanne has such a serene lakefront with the Alps in the background, it's like that motivation is really, really high. As you can imagine, to step outside, I appreciate that, it may be challenging elsewhere in the same ways. But I think what I try and do is to either head out there with a friend. So I found that, this is the new normal of meeting with your friends while going for a walk, right?
Yep.
As opposed to being very specifically focused on a certain activity, or just eating out. Um, or I'm walking while listening to music or a podcast. And on some days it can just be with you know me with myself and silence.
Yep.
And I think that the experience over the last year, it just really, really reminded me that, like, the role that clean and safe public spaces that are
Yeah.
friendly for pedestrians, like, the role that they can play in, like, people getting inspiration, right? Because you just are so much more relaxed. You don't
Yeah.
have to plan or think about it. So, like, you're not using up energy in the process of doing something. You're just doing something. And then as a result of it, hopefully good things can come to you. And I think especially relevant now, it'd be great to see more investment in that space, like, public, private, wherever it may be, because in a post-pandemic world, when we get there, people hopefully, like, will look forward to socializing and just being outdoors a lot more. And I've been seeing how, I think, in some big cities you had a lot of streets turned into pedestrian streets with outdoor seating for eating
Yeah.
out. And those are the kinds of things where you can see, like, the the joy come out. Like, people are really, really excited, and it helps when the weather is nice as well.
Wow, that's that so many interesting nuggets there. Actually, one question on the back of this I wanted to ask, and one
Sure.
general thread around public spaces that I
Mm.
wanted to tug on. So, before you were in Switzerland, you were in Mumbai,
Yeah.
right? And Mumbai, I know it's a city that you and I both we love, but of course, very very different to where you are
Mm.
right now, right? And I never really. I've always felt that you've always been a pretty inspired guy, no matter where you are in the world, even in Mumbai, even though you didn't necessarily have that same public space, right? The Alps weren't there on your in your back garden. Much more frenetic, chaotic, creative energy.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how do you think about your process? Let's say in Mumbai, to feeling inspired, thinking inspired, compared to a place like Switzerland.
It's a really good question. I haven't thought about that as much, but I can attempt to share how how I used to think about it. At least one of the things I personally really enjoyed about Bombay was that it was always open, right?
Yes.
So the energy of the night in particular was, I think, where I drew a lot of my creative inspiration from, because it's interesting, right? I think it's a combination of weather's cooler, so you want to be outside a little more, right? The place is densely populated, so you feel like the lights are on, there's activity. As you're passing by, you'd probably have conversations with different people, right, in the streets, and so you're never far away from people or a conversation, right? So I think there's a different mentality that you're adapting to. Here you can be a lot more with yourself. Even in public spaces, you just have a lot more space around you, whereas back in Bombay, I think you, in some ways, you have to enjoy the fact that you have people around you, and if you're seeking space for yourself, then I guess they're more private than they are public necessarily, and so that shift almost needs to be tailored by you, because we aren't there yet, right? As far as having enough public space for everyone to have space to themselves.
This was such a beautiful perspective that you just shared. That the fact that we often think of population density as a bad thing, right? Like, oh, Mumbai and so much of India and Indian cities are like the population density is just too high. And in many ways, of course, it is, right? And we can't romanticize the fact that like there's the infrastructure is not, it's just not at the level that it needs to be. And many people do struggle in this city, and it's important to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
At the same time, what you just said, the fact that you're never far away from people or a conversation, that's the flip side of it, right? It's almost like a conversational density, right?
Yeah.
In a place like Mumbai, it is extremely high. In fact, as you were talking about late night walks and the energy of the night, two random memories came to mind with you. One was the Friday night gathering that you always used to host at your place in Bandra, like every, without fail, if you were in the city, lots and lots of strangers would basically just come together at your place to like crazy hours in the morning for conversations. And I met just so many fascinating people that you had sort of like, just gathered at your place, just, I don't know, through your grazing, right? And the second was, I think the night before you left, we went on this long walk around Nandheri, right, in the middle of the night. And it was like, what, 1 a.m.? And yet there were so many places just open and people who are willing to have conversations. And I definitely feel you feel, it's difficult to feel very alone in this city. Again, not romanticizing loneliness, and it's a complex thing that many people do experience. But I've personally found that, wow, the city is, you may still feel a little bit on your own, but it really does its best to reassure you that there's a lot of people in it together, and the struggle is almost real, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to work hard on it, right? And I think it takes a certain type of person also to be open to that. And there's lots of friends of mine who moved to Bombay initially, then moved out to elsewhere because they just liked a different kind of life. So I think it's also about being, I think, self-aware of what you want at different stages of life. And even the even the gatherings that you referenced, that was like so serendipitous in how they started. Like literally, it was, the first time was because there were a couple of friends over and they had a couple of friends of theirs, and my friends left and the others stayed, and we ended up having conversations, became good friends, and the next time it was their friends that were around, and so it just grew organically and just became really fun thing to do, which I enjoyed, and you meet really interesting people, and so many sources of inspiration right there.
Yeah, truly inspiring and really good times. I miss them actually. I'm like, wow, they were a lot of fun.
Oh man, yeah, Bandra times for sure. have to love Bandra.
I can't wait just to come out of this pandemic and to have those experiences again, because it's difficult just being locked in an apartment and knowing what it was like in the years before, So that's going to be fun. All right, to switch gears a little bit, I wanted to try something fun and a little bit mad, right?
Okay.
It's going to be a little nuts. This is still a very new show, so we don't even know if this is going to work over the longer run or not. But let's just do it, right? So just before the call, I went on Inspo and searched for one of your favorite topics in sports, tennis. Right? You told me that it's your first love. So I'm like, okay, let me just get some inspiration around this sport. And I saved 3 pieces of AI inspiration to one of my boards.
Okay.
Now, what I'd like to do, one by one, I want to share these pieces with you. And it would be awesome if you can just share any top of mind, mad response or idea or reflection or rumination or whatever comes to mind based on them. Right? Can be totally crazy, nonsensical. Think of it just like an idea jam. Yeah, cool?
All right, let's do it.
All right. So the first is an interesting word association with tennis that caught my eye, right? And Inspo picked this up by analyzing, I think it was around 500-600 poems written in Haiku Jam.
Okay.
Right? And the word association was remember.
Remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
So for you, Aneesh, what comes to mind when you think of tennis plus remember?
Federer versus Sampras, Wimbledon 2001.
Wow. So specific.
Yeah. I remember because I started playing tennis because of Federer, and that was a match in which he just came to the fore and showed that you could win by playing a beautiful game, which is the hardest of things to do in sport. And so it's a real moment of inspiration.
Wow, that's lovely. I read some of the poems after I saw that association, just to understand like what was the context, what were the stories. And I think a few of them were in the context of like a specific game, right? Remember that sort of shot down the line by Nadal or Federer. But there was a lot of, I think the majority of those poems were really nostalgic, right? Like remember that old racket, right? Or the fact that if you see, you go back to your parents' house and you see your old tennis racket, alongside it just comes a gush and flood of memories, right? So it was, it was just laced with a lot of like nostalgia from when we all, let's say, used to play tennis and not only just watch and consume it.
Yeah, fascinating. Share that board with me. I'd love to read those poems.
Yes, I will. Awesome. Very cool. All right, this is fun. So the next piece of inspiration, this is a GPT-3 powered question.
Okay.
Right. So Inspo literally wrote this using a few associations of Haiku Jam and GPT-3.
Yeah.
Can tennis be used to teach us a lesson about the human heart?
Wow. Fascinating. There is love already embedded in the scoring system in tennis. So that's a start.
That's great.
Right. And then
that's fantastic. Yeah.
Um, but it's really interesting, right? Like if you see as a sport, right, very, very, um, you know, can be played by anyone. It's one on one, two on two, as you like. So it definitely has some potential, let's
Yeah.
say, to make matters of the heart come together.
Yeah. Awesome. And that is an
Yeah.
like that. I just love that observation as well. I didn't even occur to me that of course the scoring system it's got like love baked right into it, and it's an aspirational quality, right? You wanna you want loves. So
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
cool.
imagine like every tennis match basically starts with love all.
Oh, that's brilliant, dude. There's such a big campaign that maybe someone's already leveraged this and done it, but that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
a planner, always a planner. That's great. All right, last one.
Okay.
So this is also a GPT-3 powered thought, a thought
Hmm.
starter, a reflection, and I'd be fascinated just to get your yeah, to see what it triggers within you.
Okay.
Tennis is a game of ball and court. It's also a metaphor for life.
Interesting. Very deep quote
Yeah,
by GPT-3.
yeah. I was like, wow.
um,
I guess there's some overlap with love and the heart here, just to
yeah, I think it's
put it out there.
there's many things that come to mind when I think of it, right? Like this, if I have to become philosophical about playing tennis, you think about how it's a sport that takes some time to get good at,
Yeah,
so you need to invest in learning upfront, and it can be really frustrating to start. But as you start getting the hang of it, it is so enjoyable because you sometimes can't believe that you've like magically acquired this skill to keep this constantly moving ball within the lines of the court, right? And you can almost have it's like having a conversation with someone on the other side, because the person on the other side needs to be able to do it as well, right? So at some point you're beginning to, you know, write stories just by hitting the balls back and forth. And to your earlier point about like this moment when, a player hit an amazing shot, like at the end of a 27 shot rally. Those
yeah,
are like, like those stories that are built in moments are sort of what keeps the sport so memorable. And also I think like people just enjoy, having one person or two people to sort of, to look at and maybe identify themselves with, or just to appreciate, as it's built out. So yeah, I can definitely give a shot at at writing something about it if I had enough time to do that.
dude, that is so poetic, and I just love the way that you romanticize sport. I think we'll definitely have another conversation where I'd love just to talk to you about where this love came from.
Mm.
Um, but another little metaphor that came to mind when you were chatting, I realized that tennis it's about love, of course, but it's also about service and
Mm.
serves, right? And a conversation is literally like served,
Yes.
and then it grows, and then it ping pongs back and forth, and yeah, it's beautiful. It's literally like it's just life in motion.
Yeah, the things that AI can make you do now, man.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, what's fascinating about it is that, of course, like it's not particularly conscious, and it's a
Yeah.
complete black box as well.
Yeah.
So the way that it generated these lines and these questions, um, it's been trained, of course, on the GPT-3 model, but also associations from Haiku Jam. So, and within those associations, maybe someone had written something about the fact that, wordplay around love, right? Yeah, how tennis, I don't know, helps build confidence and helps you in the broader game of life. I'm not sure, but it's a lot of fun. I find this activity just like putting out a thought starter, and I think it's also just a beautiful way of showing how, like, in the context of creative thinking and creativity, machines and people can work together,
For
right?
sure.
On a more sort of, let's say, practical level, a machine isn't necessarily going to get all the way there. It's not necessarily going to be able to have the conversation and go through all the nuance and context that we were able to in the last like few minutes. And of course, we haven't covered everything. There's so much more nuance that we could if we thought about it and spoke for longer. And yet at the same time, a machine did help facilitate the conversation, right? It literally sparked the thought, and then the humans almost like took it from there. So it helped you graze, essentially. Helped
it's
us
very
graze.
interesting because you see that, like, machines and humans, I guess, don't tire in the same ways. So,
Yeah.
as the humans rest, and get back, they can pick up from the machine in some ways.
I think there's a huge lesson generally within that, for people as beings who are going to interact and engage with AI and machines, and also for the people who are building it, as our team is on Inspo. And that's just realizing, like, what are machines uniquely positioned to do, and what are humans uniquely positioned to do, right? And in my opinion, that human beings are uniquely positioned to create, right? And we often get it wrong when we try and behave too much like machines, right? When our routines are just too mechanical, when we are like not taking time to pause, not taking time for rest, not taking time for the things that don't necessarily have an end goal or an objective, like this conversation, right? Like, and the whole purpose of this show that we've started, it's not so that we can get to an end goal and a definition of what inspiration is, because I think, honestly, I just don't think it can be pinned down to a few words. But it's more just for the next like 30 to 60 minutes, let's just live in that world and at that part of the creative process, and then we'll emerge and hopefully be changed or inspired in some way, right?
Yeah, it's funny, as I'm paraphrasing this thing I think I was reading some time ago, where it talked about the notion of like being adorably messy should be a human right.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, and unapologetically chaotic, right? And unapologetically non-linear as well. Like, we're really good at that, and yet we almost take pride in the fact that we're working 80 hours a week and building something. And you and I, we've had a lot of conversations about this and work-life balance, and how conscious are you about your work. And I know I've always got it wrong when I've like literally trying to emulate machine behavior, as opposed to saying, it's not about necessarily running 10,000 computations in a day. It's like, just make 3 good decisions in the day.
Yeah,
right. Make 3 conscious, excellent decisions in the day. And if you can do that for as many, for a few days in a row, life will be okay. Life will be great.
So good, man.
So let's say we've had the AI component, and now let's switch gears to the human element of inspiration. I found that oftentimes in life, right, people and situations and things inspire us, and we never actually let them know, right? Oftentimes we just don't let them know, and I think this is such a shame, because that acknowledgement could make their day. And also give them the fuel and the energy and the encouragement to just keep doing whatever it is that they're doing. And it doesn't necessarily to be a quote unquote really big thing, right? It's not always like, wow, Elon's, taking us to Mars, and that is inspiring. It could be the case of just like, sharing, an evening meal on Twitter for 2 weeks, right? When you're on a trip. That's just beautiful. It's like, I may not talk to you for those 2 weeks, but I get a little glimpse into your life, into your moment, and what means something to you, and that itself, it's a privilege, right? So, as a final question, and more of a request, actually, if there's anyone who's inspired you recently, Would you like to give them a shout out and maybe just, yeah, share how it is that they've inspired your life or enriched your creative thinking?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure there are several, but the one that comes to mind immediately, and I've shared this before as well, is there's this um, person on Twitter called Johnny Sun at Jonny Sun, who I understand is the creator of this Twitter bot called at the rate Tiny Care Bot, right? TinyCarbot. And I don't know Johnny, I've never met him, but you sometimes feel like, giving shout outs like these, hopefully it gives him encouragement to keep the bot up and running, because what it's fascinating. I don't even know how I came across the bot, but I've been following it for a while. And essentially what it does is tweets personal reminders, okay, like having a sip of water, or go getting some fresh air if possible, or listening to a song, or taking a deep breath. And what is really interesting in the design of the bot itself is that like every tweet has that word please. So say,
Oh,
please
lovely.
take a sip of water, right? Please go and get fresh hair, or like, listen to a song that you like, please, right? And it's really inspiring at a time when you could use every gentle nudge that you can get in these times to take care of yourself, because you realize that there's so much going on, and especially if you have to spend time on feeds for a whole host of reasons, whether it is to inform yourself, whether it's to help someone, whether it's just to like keep up with what's going on in that reality of our life. It's nice to be served a reminder of the fact that you come first, and if you can take care of yourself, and then hopefully you can do other things too.
That is so lovely. It's, yeah, that is inspiring, actually. And I think such a beautiful use of Twitter as well, right? Like tweets they should be little positive little messages from the universe, right? Not these angry, polarized discussions that seem to be happening too often. But yeah, just a little, as you said, whether it's a nudge or just a positive affirmation or request, um, can have so much outsized impact. And thank you so much. Honestly, I know you're super busy. Thank you for taking out the time. I have never had a conversation with you where I've personally not felt like inspired and motivated
Oh,
at the end.
please
So
do.
again, that pattern and trend continues. So thank you so much.